Well, what is going on, everyone? It is so good to see you here. I need to turn up one second. There we go. Now I can hear myself. It's so good to see everyone here today. Welcome back to the stream. What is going on with my camera right now? It's just a static image. Interesting. There we go. That's better. That was weird. Well, welcome to the stream. It wouldn't be my stream without some sort of technical difficulties, now would it? So, but I'm really excited about today. We are going to be starting a new miniature on our journey together. He's super cool. I actually got him in a massive bundle that I backed on Kickstarter. Super excited about it. Hope you are too. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So this is going to be the miniature we're going to be painting here. His face is a little bit hard to see, but he is a ogre vampire hunter with an awesome like quad like spike gun and a lot of cool details with a really neat like duster. Buddy of mine hit the nail right on the thread in that this guy has some super cool like Hellboy vibes. But he also has this little flame, so we're going to get to do both some object source lighting and some non-metallic metal on this bad boy. So gonna be a fun project, gonna be interesting. We're gonna be able to do a lot of cool leather textures on his duster. There's a ton of metal and wood and fabric and different textures and things like that, so it's gonna be a joy. So to start off with, what I think I'm gonna be doing is painting the duster. It is going to be obviously the largest piece of I would guess say just area on him. So what I'm going to be doing with it is very similar to what I did with the leather texture on the bust that I just finished. I'm going to be doing some leather texturing, some wearing. I'm also going to be putting some dirt all around the edges, and then of course we're doing some object source lighting on it as well. So to begin with, I'm going to break out some Dark Umber by Pro Acryl as our base coat. So we're going to start with a fairly dark brown here. Grab a nice large brush to start off with. He does have some interesting like little buckles here. I'm not sure what you would call them, or like straps. I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to do that just yet, but we'll figure it out on the way. One of the interesting things, one of the reasons why I actually put this to the vote on my Discord, as always, it was a tie between this guy and a tiefling. But I'm actually the tiefling and this one tied, so I kind of made the choice to go with this guy, mostly because there's some really cool detail work all along the leather. Like on the top of the duster, we have these little like decorative gilting along the edges and things like that. I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to deal with that, if I'm just going to make it look like embossed leather or if I'm going to make it almost look like a gold foil or something. I don't know. We'll find out. I think it would look kind of weird for a vampire hunter to have like gold on his duster, but you never know. You come from a wealthy family of ogres. But once we're done this, the base coat at least, we'll go back for one more coat just so that we can make sure that we're getting nice, good coverage. And then we'll go ahead and start in with some of the texturing. I do have my kind of color palette chosen for both his skin and this duster. Everything else, not just yet, but I have a feeling that once we're done the duster and once we're done the skin, we'll probably be out of time for today. So, and I'm terrible with planning ahead or planning out my like schedule for what I actually accomplish on stream. So we'll see what happens. And of course we used a Zenithal highlight, meaning we're taking a dark base coat and putting a much brighter white that is highly directional. It gives us a good look at a lot of the details, but also gives us kind of an outline of where I want to put the highlights. Because if you notice, the tones here where it was black, the actual paint is drying fairly dark. On the front, it almost brings out a couple shades lighter. So having this Zenithal undercoat actually helps me get some natural highlights going on these models. Whenever we're doing something like object source lighting, I need all the help I can get. For this, we're using my Winsor Newton Series 7 size 3. Just so that we can get enough paint in the belly of the brush so that we're not having to constantly go back. Or not go back as much to my actual palette. There we go. Yeah, I'm gonna kind of give this guy almost like a Western feel in the way that I paint up his gear. Mostly because I think that would look super cool. One interesting thing about this particular 3D print, because most of the models I do on stream are 3D printed, with the exception of the Warhammer models that I've done. And the Minotaur I did a while back was not a 3D printed miniature. But most of them get printed out in one piece. If it is two pieces, it's going to be like the base separated from the body of the miniature or whatever. This guy, however, the actual hand here came with options. So when I printed it out, had the option of adding the torch or adding, I believe it was like I can't remember exactly what it was, like a stake or something like that, or some sort of weapon. But I was like, I kind of like the flame a little bit better. Give us a chance to try something new. And that new thing is I've never actually attempted to do object source lighting with non-metallic metal all in the same model. Generally speaking, I'll do one or the other because they're both pretty advanced techniques that I don't have a ton of experience with. And putting them together, I feel like is going to be kind of an interesting learning experience. And by interesting learning experience, I mean I will probably mess it up royally and have to come back and make a bunch of corrections. Which it's all part of the learning process, so it's no big deal. And as I always say, this is always going to be, in my opinion, the most boring part of any miniature painting process, and that is just getting our base coats down, because it's really just about slapping the paint on and hoping it looks good. We're really not going to see a lot of fruit of our labor until much, much later. One thing I'm not really sure about, because this looks like he's got these like greaves on, But I'm not sure if that's meant to be part of the actual duster, or if it's meant to be like he's wearing greaves and has like his sleeves on his duster rolled up. I'm not entirely sure. So we'll have to come back to those in a little bit once I've made the decision as to whether or not I want to paint those up like the duster, or if I think they're separate entirely. Also not going to do most of his buckles and straps right off the bat, because I kind of want to differentiate between the different brown or the different leather textures I'm doing. So for instance, all his straps and buckles and stuff I think would look a little bit different than the duster. So I'm going to paint that last. I'm not entirely sure his duster is going to be leather. I could end up doing like a linen texture or like a canvas texture. That's for future Mike to figure out. What's frustrating is future Mike hates it when past Mike does stuff like that. I don't know if any of y'all have ever experienced that. When you procrastinate a decision, come back, end up hating the fact that either A, the decision you made was terrible, or B, the fact that you did procrastinate and you're just like, why did I do that? Sometimes it works out, most of the time it doesn't. How's it going, y'all? Sorry, I didn't, I just saw that y'all are here. Oh, future Mike is like, what the heck did past Mike, what was past Mike thinking about? I have no freaking clue half the time. Just super annoying. It's like, why are you mad? It's like, oh, I did this, so you're mad at yourself? Well, technically, yes. But at the same time, yes. Alright, let's put this guy back on our base here. Problem is, present Mike will eventually be future Mike. Depending on how you view time, present Mike could always be future Mike, or present Mike is technically always past Mike. Didn't we have this discussion? Not you and me specifically, just on stream, like the whole idea of, are you ever truly in the present, or are you constantly moving into the future and out of the present, and the present becoming the past? I'm pretty sure we had that like philosophical. We go kind of deep on this stream sometimes. I'm not gonna lie. Like, how many times have we talked about like death or like philosophy? Oh, jeez. That's a new one. I've never had a miniature fall off of my holder before. I mean, that is the true philosophy, right? Like the test of whether or not you are truly capable of sentient thought is whether or not you enjoy pineapple on pizza. And of course the answer to that is only sentient life knows that pineapple on pizza is not the way. Like Darren Jin would come up to you and be like, this is not the way, and then shoot you in the face with his Mando guns. It's probably one of the dumbest things I've ever said. Also showing my new true nerdy self actually knowing what the Mandalorian's real name is. Because I don't think... Is it ever actually stated in the show? I don't recall. Fair enough. Pretty sure pineapple on pizza has caused the like all of the drug abuse in the U.S. all caused by... You start with pineapple on pizza, and that's a gateway. I'm telling you, pineapple on pizza one day, crack cocaine the next. Yeah, I need to go back and watch The Mandalorian. That's probably my absolute favorite like bit of Star Wars content outside of the books and movies. Yeah, the first season was actually kind of like it's very... The Mandalorian was very much so like kind of Kenobi is turning out to be, and as it's a slow burn at first, but once you actually invest and you get to season 2, you're like, holy crap, this is the greatest. At least that's how I was. But then again, we all know how much of a nerd I am, that as long as it says Star Wars, I'm going to enjoy it. I'll have very strong opinions about it, but I will still enjoy it and watch it. Which chat? I don't know. I thoroughly enjoyed. No, it doesn't. The chats that I have from you, Calico, is like future Mike, surprise with past Mike, pineapple on pizza, the real question of life, and then that you haven't finished watching the first season of Mandalorian. Right. And like I said, I can understand, because the Mandalorian for me was it's a slow burn, right? And if you push through it, then I think into season 2 it gets really, really good. That was my response to what you said. All right, so I think we're done with the base coat for base. All right, it's gonna be one of those nights, y'all. I can barely talk now. Base coats for the duster is all done. So let's go ahead and just go and do the base coat for the gun. The gun we're going to start off with, as normal, we're going to use some black gray. You know what? No, we're not. We're going to actually just use black. So I really want the darks to be dark on this one since we're going to do the non-metallic metal. Funnily enough, I actually almost wore a Star Trek shirt tonight. Then I was like, eh. Star Trek was cool for me, but it was never one of those things that I was like really into. That was more of my brother. Okay, so as always, whenever we're doing non-metallic metal, I try to add a little bit of the color that we're going to use in our light source, right? So like if we're doing a sword, it's blue for the sky. So for this, since fire is obviously orange, I'm going to add a little bit of orange into my black for my base coat. Not much, just to give it a little bit of tint and to bring it, to lighten it up a little bit, which is why I didn't want to use the black gray. This needs to be thinned a little bit. Of like Star Trek or? Gotcha. So for me, I used to enjoy Star Trek, but like, I don't know. For me, it just after a while, it got a little bit boring. Like when I tried to go back and rewatch a lot of it. Okay, so just added a little bit of color to that. It's interestingly enough, and more than likely there's some blue in this black color, but it's turning out a little bit more of a green. Interesting. Riker for me wasn't like the greatest character, like as far as people I liked. He was an okay character, but I didn't care for him. So for our skin tone, I'm going to be starting off with this. It's actually called olive skin, but with D&D, ogres generally have a pale skin tone. So I'm going to use this standard olive skin as my shadow instead of my mid-tone. And for our mid-tone, I'll actually use the highlight of this color. And for our highlights, I'll use a bone white color. Now the interesting thing about this, about at least the highlights that we're going to do, because again, we have this light source. So the difficulty with this is going to be highlighting in such a way that our light source is actually below him and not above him, which is a little bit different than what we normally do. Because normally, like, our light source is going to be the sun, right, or the sky. In this case, our light source is going to be this torch. So it's just going to take a little bit of an adjustment on my part. And kind of changing up my normal workflow when it comes to painting skin. Nice. What have you been, has it been like videos and stuff like that, or like reading like D&D books and stuff? Let's go ahead and do some work on this duster. So I've got a couple colors that I'm going to use here. I'm going to use some of this tan earth. I'm going to add some of this paint that I've had since the beginning, but I have forgotten every single time about it. It's called leather brown, and this is the color that I've always been trying to highlight to get to that final stage. And I keep forgetting that I actually own that. Gotcha. I like Critical Role and I like Dimension 20. The greatest thing that I'm watching through right now is they actually did a crossover between the two. So Brendan Lee Mulligan, who is the DM for Dimension 20, is actually doing like a not a crossover, but what do you call that? Like a second campaign alongside campaign 3 of Critical Role called Critical Role Exandria. And it's fantastic. I love it. Nice. For me, creating a character is a double-edged sword. So it is amazing, and it is the most fun part about the D&D process, but it is probably the hardest thing for new players to kind of get a handle on. Not because like in order to do that, you kind of have to know about the races and the classes, and then you need to know what to roll and when, and what to choose and when. So for a lot of newer players, character creation and combat are the two most daunting things, but they're also, for a lot of people, the most fun and the most enjoyable. It's like, I love creating characters and giving them backstories and coming up with cool, unique ideas. It's great. Yeah, out of the two, like, it's interesting because Brendan Lee Mulligan isn't better or worse than Matt Mercer, that is. It's just a different style. He's a lot more chaotic, and I really love the chaos that comes from Dimension 20. But just Critical Role is one of those things that has a lot more depth versus Brendan Lee Mulligan and Dimension 20 is just chaotic, and it's so good. So we're just going to start highlighting up on his duster here. Not really doing highlights, just kind of sketching out the color in his jacket here and where I want it to go. That's unfortunate, Calico. Oh yeah, for sure. Which Dimension 20 campaign were you watching? Oh, Fantasy High. One of the good ones for sure. I think my favorite Dimension 20 campaign would probably have to be, it's not really a campaign, it's more of a short, oh yeah, it's a short campaign, I guess you say, was the, I can't remember exactly what it was called, but it was essentially like the story of the Lord of the Rings told from the evil guy's side. And it was absolutely fantastic. And Matt Mercer actually played a character in that one, and it was amazing. I would highly recommend watching that. I'm going to move to a larger brush because we're going to need to cover a little bit more area with this first kind of mid-tone / highlight. Yeah, it's a slog though, like especially if you start with like, for instance, campaign 1 or Critical Role and try to read through or like listen through all of them. I mean, you're talking hundreds and hundreds of hours of content. I know people who have done it, people who have watched episode 1 of campaign 1 all the way through the current, and I applaud them. I do not have that much patience, honestly. Also, one of the reasons why I'm not dumb enough to stream on Thursday nights. I would not want to stream on a Thursday night with Critical Role, like especially with like my target audience isn't exactly like people who watch video games. It's definitely people who would be, you know, watching a stream like Critical Role. For the most part. I don't think my type of content would be like somebody who's all about that Fortnite life would be super into, unless we were already friends. Oh, that's an idea. So I was just kind of contemplating how I'm going to deal with these boys right here, and I think what's going to happen is that I'm more going to give the duster like a cloth texture versus a leather texture. But these little guys here will definitely be leather. So we're going to do, if you remember the last time we did leather, we did like a lot of cross hatching and techniques to make the leather look worn. So we're not going to do a ton of that this time, but we will kind of go through and do some wear patterns on this that would look more like cloth. Oh, for sure. I haven't seen all of campaign 1 of Critical Role, as I mentioned. Again, I applaud people who are able to slog through it, but it is exactly that. It's good content, but it's heavy. You know, because it's the same kind of in quality of content. It's just you know, it's a lot. Like, And then the production value too. Like it's hard to get through the really early days of Critical Role. Like when every time there was something awesome happened and they all got really excited, like all the microphones would clip to the point where you couldn't hear what was going on. And again, you know, they were just first starting out, so it's like it's not. I don't expect Hollywood style quality, but it's like if I'm going to spend, what is it, like 400 plus 500 hours watching their content, like I want it to. I'd rather be at the production value of like season or campaign 2, which in that the production quality is phenomenal. I think the hard part for me about the process that I'm going through with this miniature, number one, a lot of the cloth that I've done in the past, you know, have been like capes and stuff like that. So like the style of clothing that this guy has on, I haven't really done a ton of. So I'm kind of like trying to work my way through it, try to figure out exactly how I want this to end up in my mind. One thing that I used to do, but I haven't done it in a while, is actually take a and load this into like a 3D sculpting program that also allows you to add color to it and actually like digitally paint this out. That way I can try different paint schemes before I actually put paint on resin. But obviously that takes a lot of time because you're essentially painting the model twice. But I think it would have benefited me in this. Exactly. Fortunately, the Automod grabbed that one, but yes, I'm able to see it. But so yes, exactly. It's pretty much how I do most of my streams. Just screw it, we'll do it live. I've always wondered who uses the most curse words, the Scottish, the Irish, or the Australians. That'd be interesting to figure out. Like, I wonder if there's been a study where it's been like, who has the most, or what culture uses the most curse words out of those three. but I feel like there has to be a study. Like, there's got to be someone who was like, I wonder who uses more curse words, and actually went and like did a survey of vernacular usage or something like that. Some like weird academic paper written at some random university somewhere talking about who uses the more curse words and the language that they use. Like, is it the Scots? Is it the Irish? Who uses more? That would be fun to find out. It's one thing that always helps me when I'm trying to imagine where light's going to go is to look at the miniature from my light source and try to figure out what I can and can't see. So I'm just going to do that real quick and see what I can see. Oh, really? Interesting. I guess that makes sense. So instead of just being vulgar some of the time, you're just always vulgar, huh? Interesting. I'll have to do some research on that because that just sounds too cool. And what I mean by too cool, I don't mean like cursing's cool, bro. But what I mean is like it just sounds like stuff like that fascinates me. Of like an entire dialect that's just curse words. Like that's so interesting. How's it going, Mango? Thanks for the follow. How's it going, Liam? How you doing, buddy? Welcome to the stream, by the way, Mango. Glad to have you here. Just working on a little ogre vampire hunter here. Alright, so let's do a little bit more work on his skin here. Just gonna do a second coat of our base coat. But to catch you up, we are doing an Ogre Vampire Hunter that I got. Thought it looked pretty cool. In my Discord, every time I finish painting a miniature, I post a bunch of miniatures that I either have printed out or that I think would be fun to paint on stream, and people vote on which one they like best. This one tied for first with a Tiefling. And so it came down to which one did I want to paint. Alright, so let's go ahead, grab our mid-tone for our skin, which is going to be this. It's called Olive Skin Highlight, but I'm using it as my mid-tone because ogres in the D&D world tend to be a little bit more light skinned versus like the classic green ogre like Shrek or something like that. I say classic as if Shrek is the classic example of an ogre. So again, I'm going to be painting up his skin as if the light source is coming from our torch here. So same thing with the face. We're going to start our highlighting process kind of in the opposite of how we normally do. How I normally do it is starting from a light source coming down from the top. So we're doing the exact opposite here, which is going to be a little bit weird. But a cool challenge nonetheless. Oh, for sure. I don't really curse a ton. If I do, it's generally because I want to really, really make an emphasis on something. Like really punctuate something. Mostly because I feel like if you're going to say a word, at least in the US, it's this way. I'm not, you know, other countries it might be a little bit different. In the US, since it's looked down upon so much, or at least in my section of the US, if you're going to use it, make sure you use it in a way that really hits home what you're trying to say. Or, like a lot of people do, just use different language. Yep, exactly. Make it count. By the way, I haven't announced this yet, but I have something that I'm wanting to try. So I'm trying to get to affiliate, as every Twitch streamer ever is. But I think what I want to do, if and when I actually achieve that landmark, is do a giveaway. And that giveaway will be one of the miniatures that I painted on stream. And whoever wins the giveaway will get their choice of which one they want. The only caveat is I don't know if I'll be able to open it up to international because I have no idea what shipping would be like. But I'm thinking that's something that I've been mulling over. If y'all think that would be worth it, then let me know. Yeah. For me, I don't curse. Again, I don't curse a ton. But I think I curse more than most people do in my area. Well, I shouldn't say my area. I should say within my friend group. Yep, and then the only miniatures that would be off limits are ones that I did like on my first streams, which I painted for specific people, and they're already going to be sent to them. Because I actually painted, so Trials of Imagination, which I've kind of referenced their Discord here a couple times. They are a D&D stream on Tuesday nights. And a while back, I offered to paint all of the characters up as 3D print them and send them out, which I regretfully have not done so yet. I still have yet to send it out to everyone, but those miniatures would, like, stuff like that would be off limits, like if I were doing a commission, obviously, or something like that, but everything else would be fair game. Exactly. No, I highly doubt I'm that part of the friend group. At least I hope I'm not that part of the friend group, because that would be insane. Alright, so we're going to use a little bit of this Ushitabi Bone by Citadel as our highlight for our skin tone. And we're just going to start hitting up all of these really bright spots here. Bring out a lot of this detail. There we go. So what I'm doing whenever I highlight skin is I typically, I don't know how well you can see it because there's not a whole lot of skin there on his face, but I'll push the highlights all the way to where the shadows stop, like just go all the way forward. So I'm trying to do this in reverse from what I normally do, and it's a little bit interesting. Definitely messed up a bit there, but it's paint, so I'll just paint over it. There we go. So we can start to see a little face coming out there. I always love it when I get on a stream, I start painting something that I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing, and somehow it always turns out looking halfway decent. And I'm just like, yeah, I totally meant to do that. There we are. Alright, so what I'll do now is I'll add a little bit of this dark umber to my original skin tone to kind of get a little bit of a darker shadow. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to start painting like the back of his neck, behind his ear, and stuff like that to kind of give this idea of a shadow being cast by the flame. Normally I work from darkest to lightest, but in this case, I'm not. Don't know how to put that, but I'm not. There. Just gives it that little bit more of a nice, what is the word I'm looking for? Contrast. so we can kind of tell where the different pieces of his face start and stop. I think the absolute most difficult part of this miniature is going to be his eyes, mostly because they're essentially non-existent, so I'm not even sure if I'm going to do them or not. If I do, it'll just be this eye here, because it's somewhat, at least somewhat visible. All right, so let's grab some polished bone. We're gonna add a couple of like specular highlights. Not specular highlights, just like a couple of bright highlights. Gonna add a little bit of that bone color back in. Just to kind of crank up the idea that his skin is a little bit shiny. Like that. And then we'll take this pure bone white, and this is what we're gonna do his little tusks with. Or tusk, I should say, because there's only one sticking out of his mouth. Like that. Got a little face. All right, so let's grab our red here, or technically it's a burnt red, and we'll try to do his eye. I'm not sure how well it's gonna turn out, but we're gonna try it anyway. As always, I start with a red base. I'll do an off-white for the whites of the eyes, and then for this, because it's so small, we're not gonna do an iris, but we will put a pupil on. Need more light. Sorry, my head's in the way. You know, I do need more light. Hold on, give me 1 second. Be right back. Don't go anywhere. I'm almost back. Just wait. 1 second. All right. I need my nerd glasses. All right. All right, there we go. That's much better. I'm still having such a hard time seeing where this stupid eyeball is at. I literally just put a big red blob where his eye would be. Exactly. We're not nerd glasses, I'm just being tactical. So incredibly hard to see that eye. This is an awesome sculpt except for the face. Like, really frustrating trying to see those eyes. It's called Trials of Imagination. And I'm not in it just yet. That will start Well, I guess I have been in it, haven't I? But I'll DM for them coming up here next week, next Tuesday. And then my character will actually start on the stream the week after that. In fact, Liam in here, we're doing a special one-shot for him. I'm not sure why it didn't work, Liam. It is twitch.tv / Trials of Imagination. Yeah, I'm not even going to bother with this eye. I cannot see it. For whatever reason, whoever sculpted this decided that we didn't need a left eye. Everything else about this model is fantastic except that one piece. Oh, that's right. It is 2-bit lane. It's not Trials of Imagination, whatever. I got it wrong. Alright, now let's go ahead and grab my custom. My little custom color that I made. And we'll go ahead and do the whites of his eye. As much as I can see, at least. All right. Now I'm intentionally leaving quite a bit more of the red around his eye than I would normally, because the whites of his eyes are so incredibly similar in color to his skin tone that I want to make sure there's that differentiation between the two. Looks like I might have a bit of dry paint on the tip, very tip of my brush. Oh, I do. There we go. Every so often, whenever I'm painting, there'll be just like a little piece of dry paint on the very tip of my brush that prevents the paint from flowing out like it should. There we go. That's an eyeball. Not bad. Not bad for basically me having to freehand sketch that, seeing as how that eyeball pretty much doesn't exist in the sculpt. And that's the thing. Like, I love different models and stuff like that, but it's whenever I get a model that isn't well sculpted, it's so frustrating. And I guess for me, the reason why it's even more frustrating is the fact that everything else on this model has been exquisitely sculpted, except his eyes on the face. It's like, what in the world? All right, So his face, I think, is pretty much done. I'm only doing the front side of his face because the back half is kind of covered up. And again, that other eye I literally cannot get to because I can't see it. Oh, now I can. I just needed to turn the model. Go figure. There we go. Not bad placements. We'll let it dry. It shouldn't take too terribly long. And then we'll go ahead and add the whites and the pupil. So I'm sorry that y'all can't see this. I'm just having to hold it in such an awkward way to try to get to this eye. But I think I got it. And then we'll just do the eyeball. Or not the eyeball. I'm already doing the eyeball. The pupil. The hardest part, in my opinion, about doing eyes is always the placement of everything. Is it well placed so that the eye doesn't look like your model is cross-eyed? That's always the hardest part about doing eyes, in my opinion at least. And then of course, if you mess up, you have to go back with your skin tone. Liam is, I'm about to be, and it is on Tuesdays. Normally, this week is a little bit different because Matt, who is the DM, is out of town, and then next week is a Liam special one-shot. I'll be DMing that, so I will be on. Ooh, that was bad placement. Holy cow. That was bad. Oh my gosh. I put that pupil so now it looks like one eyeball is cross-eyed and one's looking straight forward. That did not look great. That's much better. It's gonna have Liam in it. There's your spoiler. Even though we called it Liam's one shot, we didn't want people to know that Liam was actually in it. But now you know. Buyer beware, Liam is in his own one shot. No, don't. How dare you? Pretty sure Twitter is angry over things that even if it was a big surprise, nobody would know. Just put a little water on my brush here just so that my paint will flow off a little bit easier. There we go. Just wanted to do a little bit of a correction on the eye. So once it dries, we'll go ahead and do that. All right, so while it dries, I took a picture. So one of the things that I've been told is a good practice is to paint your miniature black, and the part where you want to be like metallic, you take a picture with a source light on it. So that's what I did. This is a picture of his gun that I took with just black primer, and that is the light pattern that I'm gonna use. So that's what I'm gonna use as my reference photo. So I'm gonna set this over here, but when I look down like in that direction, that's what I'm gonna be looking at, so that I know exactly where to put all my highlights on his gun. But we'll finish the eyeball first. There we go. I don't know, I'm not sure TMZ has the greatest reputation, and especially after the trial. All right, so we'll take a little bit of our black gray to start adding some highlights. And then we're going to very, very quickly move up to light gray. And then to basically white, but we'll get there in just a second. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that is the case, yes. Pretty sure they will just take whatever they can get at this point. Alright, so add a little bit of our orange. That's going to be a little bit too dark, I think, so I'm going to bring in some of my white here, some nice bright titanium white, which is the brightest white I have. We'll grab a little bit of that, just a smidge, and bring this paint up by a couple values. And then bring back in some of our orange, because adding white and black tends to desaturate color. There we go. And looking at my reference photo, the highlights on the gun barrels are literally just vertical highlights going straight down the barrels. So what I'm going to do with those is I'm really going to punch in the brighter tones, but I'll start with this dark tone to almost give it almost like this idea of secondary reflection. A satirical esports version of TMZ. So isn't that kind of like The Onion? So like The Onion for esports? Gotcha. Fair enough. There is a satire site that I really enjoy. It's called the Babylon Bee, but it's not as good as it used to be. It used to be like poking fun at like church people, and I really liked it because I'm a church person. But now it's gotten like super political, and it's not as good as it used to be. But it used to be like fire. Go, and then we'll do kind of the similar reflection on the tips of the barrels, because there's almost like a I'm not sure what you would call it. It's not, because it's not like a muzzle brake. Not sure what you would call that bit. Guess the crown of the barrel, maybe? Even though it's not really a crown. Because the crown of a barrel is usually just like basically smoothing out the sharp edges at the front of the barrel, not like these little bumps or raised edges. Alright, so we'll do the same thing on the inside after this band. And looking at my source material, there's a very thin black line between like the back of the chamber and the front of the barrel, so we'll make sure to leave that. But I think I'm hoping this gun comes out really nicely, because it really is like one of the focal points of this entire miniature. Like it almost is like part of the miniature's identity is just this massive gun. And I had a coworker who's also on my Discord mentioned that again he felt like this had some really cool Hellboy vibes, and I feel like the gun really attributes to that. You know, the gun and the duster and the hat and all that, you know, just looks awesome. Doing stuff like this, especially amongst all these fine details, is where having a brush with a very sharp tip comes in really handy, because it allows you to get into all these really fine areas and not have to worry about your getting paint where you don't want it. Even though I definitely just got paint where I don't want it. Oh, the ironies of when I say something like, oh, I can put paint where I don't want it, and then immediately put paint where I don't want it. But that's not the brush, that's me. There we go. Grab a little bit of our original color so we can kind of fix this mistake that we made. It's not that big of a deal. especially since we have our original color still on our palette, which again is one of those benefits of a wet palette that you get. That you don't have all of these colors drying out and having to remix constantly. Helps quite a bit. Whenever you want to get into painting, having a wet palette is like an absolute must. All right, so now looking at my reference photo, the chambers have, which are a rounded bit, have kind of this dot reflection that's in line with the reflections on the barrel. So I'll make a slightly larger one for our darker color. Yeah, it used to be stuff like, you know, like there's a debate of like in Christianity of like Calvinism, you know, which is like predestination or free will and all that kind of stuff. And then like, so they made fun of, like, they'll make fun of people who believe in predestination, and then in the same breath they'll make fun of the people who like disagree with it. Then they'll like make fun of like one denomination of church or then another, but then the very next one they'll be like, you know, like AOC does this. I'm like, dude, you're just do the church humor thing, please. Some of it is genuinely funny, but like it's not what it used to be, unfortunately. Back in my day, Babylon Bee didn't do that political stuff. That's how I feel like right now. One interesting thing is actually there are reflections inside the hammer housing, so I'm just going to add those in. Not sure exactly what you call that, but I will continue to call it hammer housing until another word is given to me. Just gonna correct a few things here because I got a bit sloppy. There we go. Now I'm going to take a little bit of this and I'm going to dry it off as much as possible because the reflections on the top of this band here are the same as the rest of the barrel, but there's these like little details, almost like a etching on them, and I want to make sure that I'm not filling in those etching with my paint, that I'm just hitting the raised bits. Having a nice dry brush without a lot of moisture on it helps to hit those details without filling in all the gaps. And then we'll work on our front sight, which is essentially just going to be an edge highlight along it. And the same thing on the rear sight. All right. Oh, actually there's a little bit of on the inside of the sight here. Like so. All right, so, and then on the chain, looks to just be all the different raised areas here. Just on the, like, on the curves of the links. It's not all along the edges, which is interesting. I find, at least. Because you would think every raised edge that is facing the light would have a reflection, but evidently, according to my reference photo, it does not. There we go. I think that looks like metal already, but we have one more stage, or actually technically two more stages. So we'll have bring in our light gray. With our light gray, I'm going to add a little bit more orange to start bringing in that idea of the fire being reflected in the metal. Add a little bit of water here just to thin it down. And what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing on these highlights, except we're going to go inside. We're not going to go all the way out to the edge like we did with our first highlights. And it's okay if these highlights look a little bit rough and aren't exactly straight, because the gun barrel actually doesn't have like, it's not smooth, it's textured. So I'm going to leave I'm going to leave a little bit of that original gray there, but I'm going to push quite a bit of this next highlight in, because the highlight after this is going to be just straight up bright white. So we can get that contrast looking nice. So the highlight on this third barrel here goes all the way to the inside where the barrel meets. So I'm actually going to be getting rid of most of that gray except for on the very outside. So I've actually never listened to their podcast. I've only really kind of do what most people do with satire and look at the headline and go like and then that's about it. I've read a few of their articles too, the ones that really stood out, and they're really funny, but I actually haven't listened to any of their podcasts. I actually don't know if their podcast is still considered satire or if it's more like serious. Technically, satire is serious because satire seeks to point out like reality through humor, but what I mean by serious is like not comedy. I used to be. I used to, back in when I first moved to the area that I'm in, I actually used to deliver snack machines to like refill vending machines. So deliver snacks to vending machines. And I would listen to podcasts like pretty much always. And then I actually started to listen to books, like audiobooks. And so podcasts are pretty much like if I'm going up to the store or whatever, like I'll throw on a quick 15-minute podcast for the drive. But for like longer drives and stuff like that, or like when I'm painting on my own and not on stream, I'll throw on an audiobook. Gotcha. Yeah, I genuinely had no idea. Because like I said, I really was only familiar with the fact that they were basically the quote-unquote Christian version of The Onion. Gotcha. What audiobooks have you listened to recently? So mine would be, I'm reading through Brandon Sanderson's The Wax and Wayne series from like the Stormlight Archives, from Mistborn. Add a couple spots here of our bright highlight, and I'll come back in once I transition to our essentially our brightest highlight, which will just be nearly pure white mixed with a little bit of orange. Just gonna hit a couple spots here with this yet. Interesting. I must say I've never read through, like, I really want to read like Dracula and Frankenstein. I just never taken the time to do it, and then but now that I'm big into audiobooks, I might actually, invest in those two books because they're classics. It's like if you read books, a couple of, especially if you read fantasy, there's a couple of requirements, right? You have to read Lord of the Rings, and I feel like you would have to read stuff like Frankenstein, The Invisible Man, like some of those old like creature horror / sci-fi books. I feel like those are required reading for nerds. To an extent, at least. Alright, now we're going to go in for our brightest highlights. It's mostly going to be white with a little bit of orange, but not much. So this I'm going to have to be very careful with because I don't want it to be, I just want a nice thin line down the barrel. I'm already kind of at an awkward angle here too. Go. Add some highlights here along the front sight. Ooh, I like the way that's looking, y'all. Ooh, I'm getting excited now. It's one of those moments where something that I am trying is actually working and looking halfway decent. Exactly. It's interesting, like that. It's that moment of euphoria when something you create actually starts looking like you want it. Where it's like, wow, I made this and it actually looks good. Versus like looking at something somebody else did and be like, there's this difference in like feeling between being like, oh, I did that, and like looking at something beautiful that somebody else did. You know what I mean? Like you can appreciate the art. I can appreciate the art from, someone who is seasoned and talented and amazing and doing significantly better work than I am. But like that moment when I do something that another artist has been doing like perfect for like years. I do it like halfway decent once. I'm like, yes. That moment of celebration of like, I cannot believe I actually did this, and it looks pretty neat. Because you know, the very next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go on to a forum or a Facebook group that is all about like the miniature painting hobby, and I'm going to ask for critiques. And I'm going to take those critiques and apply them. But for now, I'm going to be proud of what I've done so far. I'm going to paint a few like little glints on the bands here. I'm not going to paint just straight through them like I did before. But I'm going to try to kind of work around some of the who's it? I can't think right now. The engraving, working around the engraving. All right. And then we'll add a couple highlights on the hammer here. Go. And then a little bit more on the band on the bottom here. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is the I wish I did it versus the I actually did it. It's that point of like, of being like, dude, I wish I could do what that person does, and actually doing it. Because like, it's not the greatest non-metallic metal, but I think that looks baller, dude. I'm really proud of how that turned out. Like, yeah, I'm just excited. And you're right, it's one of those moments of, I did this. So now it is time to, I'm not done the duster, but I think I want to take a break from the duster. Because I finished the face, I finished the gun. So I think I want to do the flame next. So there are a few things I want to do really quick, because I want this flame to be pure white as much as possible. So I'm just going to put some white paint in areas where I think that I'm going to keep as pure white. Because whenever you're painting fire or anything that's hot or energy based, and you want it to look bright, well, the center is always going to be the brightest point. It's be the part with the most energy. So, in the case of a torch, even though we're going to be painting most of it yellows, different shades of yellow and orange, you want the center of it to be pure white. Even though fire naturally is not pure white at its center, it will give the illusion of brightness. Exactly. That dopamine hits hard, dude. Where did I put my texture palette? It's underneath my Warhammer box here. Warhammer box and a spoon. Don't know how that spoon got there. I know how that Warhammer box got there, though. Alright, so we're going to grab a couple paints here. We're going to grab Pro Acryl's Golden Yellow, Pro Acryl's Yellow Warm. We're gonna grab my where you at? I just had it. There's a, oh, here it is. We're gonna grab orange red and fire orange. So those are the colors that we're going to be using. Start off with our golden yellow here. So I've been thinking about listening to Terry Pratchett's audiobooks. I've been craving something like that, especially with D&D stuff I've been watching. Yeah, so I haven't read any of Terry Pratchett's stuff. I probably should, because I've heard that name being thrown around a ton. But I love, for fantasy, Brandon Sanderson. He's like a fantasy god as far as like he's an extremely prolific writer. I haven't read anything of his where I'm like, that's a miss for me. Like everything that I've read from him has been absolutely fantastic. And I've heard the same by pretty much everyone who's read his stuff. And there are some books that are like, I could take it or leave it. Like some of his earlier works, I mean, they're good, especially considering his like the people he's kind of up against. I guess you could say his competitors in that genre. But man, dude, he is so good. So as you can see, we're keeping the center of that nice and bright white. Now, I will say, if you are new to reading fantasy, don't start with him. Okay. Which one would you recommend? All right, we're gonna take a little bit, oops, wrong twisty thing. Almost twisted the entire cap off of this bottle instead of just the top there. I'm gonna mix a little bit of this warm yellow with a little bit of this fire orange to get my next color. I'm using my flat dry brush for this because I want this to be a little bit more directional. And a flat dry brush is a lot easier to work with in tight areas. All right, and then we're going to go with our pure fire orange. All right, cool. Now we'll go ahead and throw down some of the orange red on the palette. Mix a little bit of the fire orange with that for our next tone. And we're just gonna slowly build up these colors until we get to a pure orange red. And then we're just gonna add a little bit, a very little bit of black at the very tip of the fire, giving it a little bit of a smoke effect. And we'll go with our pure orange red. So what kind of fantasy author is it? Is it more like high fantasy? Is it like easy reading fantasy, like teen fantasy? Like what kind of genre would he be in? going to take a little bit of this black mixed with orange. I'm just going to hit the very top of this fire to kind of give the effect that it is starting to smoke a little bit. I just want very little. I really don't want terribly much. And then we'll take a little bit of that pure black and we'll do it again. So we're going to go a little bit darker. Like so. All right, cool. Gotcha. Interesting. I'll tell you what, one book that I read a while ago that is the absolute like peak of satire and comedy in fantasy is The Princess Bride, the actual novel, The Princess Bride. The whole thing is framed as if he found this ancient tome, and what he's presenting to you is actually the like the abridged version of what he got, where he's like talking about how like there's like, and here we have 15 pages talking about women's hairstyles of the 13th, and it's so funny. I would highly recommend, if you like satire and stuff like that, I would highly recommend that as well. Reading the Princess Bride novelization, it's amazing. Well, it's not really a novelization. The movie was based on the novel, but it's fantastic. Alright, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start painting in because there's a little bit of the exposed like bit of the torch that's actually like the fuel source. I'm going to paint it pure black, and then I'm going to highlight some of the edges of this red to kind of give it the idea that it is on fire. And you can kind of tell when you look at like a picture of a torch where you have like that ember that's on like on the edge of the torch. I don't know, maybe my memory is faulty. I'm pretty sure that's it. I always find it interesting because I tend to fall into this trap too, where people who paint miniatures, or especially fantasy miniatures, want to make it look realistic. I'm painting an ogre. Like, how do you paint a realistic ogre? I kind of know what the answer is for me, but like, it's just something to think about. Like, if you ever do get in this hobby, it's like, what does it mean to actually paint something in a quote unquote realistic way when you're painting something that is a fantasy creature? For me, it means that my skin looks like skin, even though it might be green. Or my fire looks like fire, even though it's in a fantasy world, because fire is going to work the same way. But something to think about. Alright, we're going to grab some of this. Ugh, that orange is weird. It has some interesting properties. From the top surface of it was dry, even though the rest of it was actually still wet. I'm just going to take this orange here, and I'm going to start painting in my ember here. Now the hard part about this is going to be the coverage, because I'm painting a color that, honestly, orange has terrible coverage. So I'm painting a color that has a terrible coverage, typically, on pure black, which is not going to be great for time spent on this, because it's going to take some time and several coats. But I think the effect will be worth it in the end. Yeah, it's absolutely hilarious. I love it to death. Brilliant piece of comedic writing. It was one of the few actual like hardcover books that I've read in like recent years, because I mostly read audiobooks because I just unfortunately don't have the attention span to sit down and read like I used to be able to. It's ironic because I can sit here and paint a miniature for hours, but part of that is I can listen to an audiobook while I paint. It'd be a little bit weird to listen to an audiobook while I read a book. Kind of defeats the purpose, unless I'm listening to the same book I'm reading, which I know people who do that. There we go. All right, cool. So that is our fire and the top of our torch done. All right, so next things I want to do is I'm going to want to, I think I'm going to do that, yeah. So one thing I was thinking about while I was painting this gun is I want the, in between each barrel to be like a pure black. So just very carefully apply a black, kind of, I guess what you could consider a panel lining or a recessed shade, except I'm actually painting it in versus using a wash like I would normally. Because again, contrast, especially when it comes to non-metallic metals, contrast is what sells the effect. So adding pure black next to my bright, or not next to, but near my bright highlights sells that effect a little bit better. I say that as if I actually know that for a fact. I have been told that it sells the effect. Does it actually? I don't know. I guess we'll figure it out. That. We'll do this here. What I need to do, and I've talked about doing this, is I need to like mark an area on my desk where I should be holding my miniature, because I have such a bad habit of pulling it out of frame. Yeah. Gotcha. So I'm kind of the opposite. Like the books that I have read recently have been books that I have listened to audiobook and really enjoyed. And I enjoyed so much that I wanted to make the effort to actually read it in the medium that it was written in. That was published in, I should say, because that was kind of a dumb statement. Yeah. Like I read through the Sword of Truth series. I wouldn't really recommend it. It's not that great of a series. It was great for me when I first started getting into fantasy. It's a great like entrance into fantasy, but overall it's not. Now that I think back on it and try to reread through it, it's not that great. But I did that where I listened through the entire 13-book series via audiobook. And then I went and bought physical copies of some of the books. Alright, I need to... Where is it? There it is. So there's one thing in the picture that I forgot about to do. Inside these little housings where the hammers would strike, there is a little bit of a secondary reflection. Like so. There we go. All right, and looking back, do a quick edge highlight on this little plate here. I love how I was like, all right, I want to go do this one thing on this gun, and then I'm like, oh nope, I want to do everything else again. Need to fix everything, even though I really shouldn't be fixing everything because it looks fine. One of those things where it's like, it looks fine, and then I go and look at it again. It does not look fine anymore. Which is, I think that's for me, one of the problems I have with my own art is because I've also written a little bit too. I'm always come back to it and I'm like, I don't really like it. But then everybody's like, dude, we love it. I'm like, but it's not that good. Why do you like it? And they're like, oh no, it's perfect. I'm like, no, it's not. I go back and look back at some of the miniatures I painted 6 months ago, and in my opinion, they're terrible. But then I go back and look at the comments on people, and people are like, "Oh my god, dude, these are amazing. How did you do that? So much detail." I'm like, bro, all I did was paint it and throw a wash on it. I didn't even try that hard compared to what I'm doing now. And it's one of those things, if you're an artist, you know exactly what I'm talking about. When you're painting something, you see every little thing wrong with it. Honestly, art is almost like a window into how we think as human beings. So often we look at ourselves and we see every little thing that's wrong. We like to compare ourselves to other people, compare ourselves to significant others or friends or colleagues. And what ends up happening is we see ourselves in light of what we view as perfection instead of viewing ourselves for who we really are. Similar with art, you always see what you do as inferior to other things out there when in fact there are people who love and enjoy your art for what it is. And the thing that you've got to learn both in life and with art is that, dude, you're good enough. At whatever stage you are in your artistic journey, if you're doing the absolute best that you can, then it's perfect the way it is. You're always going to get better. Even people who are winning, in miniatures, who are winning crystal brushes, they get better. They improve themselves in their art. Similar to ourselves, we have to be willing to improve ourselves, yes, but we also need to recognize that we're not other people. We're ourselves. So just be yourself, and if you're good enough. You're just good enough, dude. You don't have to worry about trying to be something else. As long as you are improving yourself, it doesn't matter what in the stage of improvement you're in. Don't know if that makes sense or not, but yeah, exactly. If you try to compare yourselves with other people, all you'll end up with is miserable and still not those people. Instead, look at where you came from and where you are now. and see the trajectory that you've made in your life, and then go from there. Because guess what? You're not the same that you were yesterday. If you were the same you were yesterday, then you're dead, right? And even bones change over time. Change is just part of life. So go back, look at where you've been, look at where you are now, and you'll see change, and you'll see improvement, and you'll see where, you may have been one way at one time, but over time, and that's kind of the trouble with time, right? When we're looking at ourselves and improvement, we never see our own improvement because it takes so long, So basically, stop comparing yourselves to other people and just be you. And as long as you're trying to improve yourself, then that's all that matters. Yeah, like art especially. I feel like a lot of people compare their art to what they think they could be and what they are, and they don't see that they are where they want to be, and so instead of improving, they get kind of depressed. The only reason I say that is because that's kind of my journey, artistic journey, is one of being like, oh man, I'm never going to be as good as X, or I'm never going to paint something as good as Y. And then I'll post my miniature on like some Facebook group or something, and everybody's like, oh my goodness, it's so amazing. I wish I could paint like that. And at one point I just had to step back and be like, if people are saying that about my art, what does that mean? Does that mean like I'm not really that good in the realm of miniature painting? Like, I think I'm a pretty, I guess you could say, like intermediate as far as skill base goes. But guess what? There's still beginners out there. So don't compare yourself to professional painters or professional artists. Just be happy with the art that you have now. And again, keep practicing and keep improving. Everyone will get there eventually. And I wish I had somebody give me that advice when I was a teenager and starting to play guitar. Because the first year that I played guitar, there was such a jump in, like, just being a guitar player, I guess, and like my skill. But then I just stopped practicing because I kind of got tired of like not being where I wanted to be at. ADHD didn't help either. So these little leather bits on the back of his cloak, I'm just adding a little bit of cross hatching, a little bit of wear on the side of them. Kind of like that. And then I'll go in with, where are you at? Here you are, Agrax Earthshade. And I'll just add a little bit of an edge or a recessed shade here. Just kind of make a little bit of this pop just so I can see if it is where I want it to be. Yeah. Yep, exactly. And as long as you're improving, like that's the thing. I can't stress that enough. Like, if you just stop practicing, and stop doing it, like doing art overall, that's one thing. But if you're continuing to practicing and trying to better yourself and better your art, then dude, you are exactly where you need to be, and need to stop comparing yourself to other people. But if you stop trying, you're never going to improve. You're never going to get to, somebody, the same level as somebody else. But guess what? Even if you got to the same skill level as somebody else, you're going to start to develop your own style. You're going to start to develop your own habits and favorite colors to paint with, and your own like palette and your own way of applying texture and your own way of, doing your workflow is going to be different than everybody else's. So even when you get to the skill level of somebody who is like, let's say you got to, like, let's talk about guitar, right? Say you got to the skill level of a Steve Vai or someone like that, you're not going to sound like Steve Vai. So just start doing it your own way and being yourself in your art, and improve skill, yes, but don't try to be someone you're not. Yep, exactly. That is a perfect example for my D&D nerds out there. Brendan Lee Mulligan and Matt Mercer both are phenomenal DMs, both with completely different DM styles. And they both work really, really well in their context. That's a perfect example of exactly what I'm talking about. So, let's go ahead and do some work on the shaft of the torch. I'm going to use some mahogany color. The reason I'm going to use mahogany is I'm going to eventually apply a wash to it. And so I want that wash to be a little bit reddish. So I'll add a mahogany color to it. And then when I apply the wash, it'll look a little bit more brown. And then I'll probably dry brush a little bit of yellow or something over it to kind of play off the reflections that would be on it from the fire. There's also some cool metal bands around this torch as well. So some more opportunity to do some really cool non-metallic metal. You know what? After I finished the face, I completely forgot to do his fingers. His fingies. So I'll come back and do some highlights on those as well in just a second. A little bitty bit right here behind his hand. Go ahead and grab that. And I'm not going to lighten that one up because that one actually would be under shadow. I'll just apply the wash on that one and call it done as far as that one goes. Cool. Yep. And let's go ahead and highlight that hand a little bit. And it's going to be a little bit off center because his hand wouldn't be highlighted on the tops of his fingers. Or like if you're holding your hand like in a fist like that, it wouldn't be the top of the finger that is highlighted. It'd actually be, you can kind of see on this finger here how it's a little bit off center here. Oops, wrong color. I have so many similar colors on my palette, it gets confusing sometimes. we are. Nice. All right. So one of the things that I have to make a decision on with this is exactly how I'm going to do the light. Now, fire is going to put off a bit of a orange glow to it, but not a ton. So it's not going to be like completely yellow or orange, but at the same time, it's not going to be just bright areas and dark areas either. So one of the things I'm kind of contemplating as I go here is I want to figure out exactly how I'm going to paint up some like the actual glow from the fire. Yeah, it's a little bit odd. It's literally the exact opposite of how you paint everything else on a miniature. Because the rest of the miniature, you're going from dark to light. But fire, it's the exact opposite. You paint from light to, and then you shadow up to dark. And then of course, like, how do you do the reflections? Well, closer to the light source, normally it would be the closer to white you get. But in this case, the closer to the fire, the more color it would have because it's not a really bright light. So what I'm thinking is that around where this flame is approaching his like belt and duster here, it would all have a orange yellow tint, and then the further away from it I get, the closer to its natural color that I'm going to have. And then everything else will just be shadowed. At least that's what I'm thinking at this point. Don't really know yet. So let's go ahead and do his hat here. I'm not exactly sure what color I want to do his hat though. I think black would look fine. Because I think we're a little bit overloaded on the brown with the color of his duster. So I don't want to do that. So while I do that, I'll paint his little bandana that he's got on here. I'm going to paint it red. And of course, if I paint red, I'm going to start with mahogany. Because that makes sense, right? But we'll start with mahogany as our shadow. We'll use the burnt red as our highlight or our midtone, and then our, what does Pro Acryl call it? Our bold pyrrole red as our highlight. There we go. And we'll wait. Oh, nope, we missed a little bit. Yeah, it's okay. There we go. Then I also have to figure out what color I want his pants and his shirt to be as well. I'm thinking about doing something similar with his shirt that I did with the last miniature, kind of doing like a natural cotton, natural like wool kind of color, so almost like a yellowish white. I'm not entirely certain. I could just send it and not worry about it. You know what? I think that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to use... I'll take a little bit of the Zandri dust that I've got, or not Zandri dust, but this Ishtabi bone. I'll add a little bit of the bone white to it to lighten it up and give it more of a off-white feel. And that's the color I'll use as my shadow on his shirt. And then I'll bring in some off-white and then some pure white Actually, I'll use polished bone, then off-white, and not worry about the pure white. Actually, I just noticed something. I have to look at the renders online to see, but he may not be wearing a shirt. I honestly can't tell because there's so much stuff everywhere. But it almost looks like he's not wearing one. In which case I can just use the skin tone. Yeah, let's do that. Let's just assume it's skin. Because that's definitely what it's looking like to me. There's not much of it, so it won't be too terribly difficult. Do you know what I need? I need a monitor to go like right here so I can see like when I'm looking down at my miniatures, so I can actually see when y'all chat, because it's when I get into like some of the details I'm really having to concentrate, I'm not looking at fair point, Tricky, fair point. Yeah, I don't think he divides his whites from his colors either. In fact, he also strikes me as the kind of guy that doesn't ever empty out his lint filter. That's so dumb, but it's so... gosh, that's hilarious. Alright. Let's go ahead and do some highlighting on his cravat, or whatever it is. I'm just going to call it that, even though it's probably more of a bandana. And paint up some of these highlights in lines as well to give it a little bit of texture. There we are. And then once that is dried, jeez, I cannot talk. We'll go in with our bright red and do our final highlight. I say final highlight, it's not really the final highlight, because the final highlight will probably come after we apply our object source lighting. So again, I'm just looking up from my light source just to see what I would be hitting and what I wouldn't be. All right, time for our bold pyro red as our final highlight. We're not gonna need a ton either, just enough. Doesn't take much. All we really want to do is just kind of highlight that the volumes that we have are indeed there. Like so. I think that looks super awesome. All right, now that that's done, we'll go back to our skin tone and apply another coat here to his chest area. And basically all we're doing is we're just trying to get that nice, solid, or opaque coat of the skin tone here. From a D&D perspective, what you got? Someone sits down to play and slams down this model. Do you acknowledge the difference of his weapon from a normal gun? So, unlike Warhammer, at least in D&D, the model has very little to do with the actual character. In Warhammer, obviously, like, you know, you typically stat out your army based upon what guns and stuff you've attached to your actual model. So that's not really the same in D&D. And usually in D&D, you're just going to pick out a mini that closely resembles what you think your character would look like. So, for instance, if this guy wanted to be a gunslinger and he brought this model, I'd be like, all right, awesome, you're a gunslinger. It wouldn't really matter as far as like what kind of gun he has, if that makes sense. So now one interesting thing about this model, at least that I'm really liking, is the way the torch is. I'm actually going to be getting some really cool like shadows on his skin, on his chest here, and I am all about it. It looks so cool. And then the light would be hitting just on the edge towards the belt here on his stomach. Like so. But yeah, there's a lot of people who don't actually use minis at all for D&D. In my opinion, they're missing out because minis are like, I'm all about being physical with D&D. So like I roll with physical dice. I prefer minis and playing physically. There's nothing wrong with playing digitally. I just think there's something to sitting at a table with your friends with a mini that you painted in a physical set of dice that just beats out any other D&D experience I've ever had. Oh, why did I do that? I did the wrong thing. I was gonna glaze up a piece of this that I actually didn't want to glaze up as a highlight. I wanted to glaze it up as a shadow. There's a bit right here where his skin kind of dips, and I want to just add a little bit of shadow into that dip. Like so. Just a little bit. Depending on where you are, typically there are a ton of like game shops and stuff like that. That would be more than where you'd have a ton of people who would be like, who are like looking for players and stuff like that. So I wouldn't doubt you'd be able to find something there locally. But if not, playing digitally over something like Foundry, Roll20, which are virtual tabletops, it's still just as fun. It's just a different experience, you know what I mean? Like, I'm about ready to play a game with some of my friends digitally without, you know, not in person, and I'm still just as excited about it as I am with anything else. Technically, I'm probably a little bit more excited because it's a game with like family and really close friends that I haven't played with in a long time. Yeah, and something else you can do is a lot of the times the people who run the shops would actually be able to help you find a group. So you probably wouldn't even get the awkwardness of having to walk up to somebody and ask them. You could probably just ask the store players, the store manager or keeper or whatever, being like, "Hey, I want to get into D&D. Are there any groups who would be willing to help a new player?" And the answer to that would be, "Oh yeah, let me introduce you to this guy," or "Here, let me give you a phone number," or something like that. At least, again, that's been my experience. It may not be the same experience as some other people, but typically that's, you know, you're able to find a group pretty dang easily. I'm actually going to feather this out a little bit. I think the transitions between the shadow and the highlight are a little too stark, so I'm going to just add a little bit more mid-tone back in there. There we go. For sure, man. I completely understand where you're coming from. Like, especially as somebody new, you know what I mean? Like, it can be a little bit daunting. There we are. All Alright, so I think I'm done his chest. I am done the fire, his gun, his face, his bandana, and I'm well on the way to finishing his duster. So I'm really liking how this is turning out. But we're at 2.5 hours now, and I really don't want to get started on something else and not being able to finish it tonight. So we'll go ahead and call it there, folks. As always, thank you so much for joining me. It's been fun as always. I cannot wait till Wednesday. I'm really looking forward to both hanging out with you guys and finishing this awesome miniature. So as always, thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to next time. But until then, have a great evening.